Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we stand on, that we live and work on, the Wurundjeri and Wurrung people. I'd like to say that solidarity is never ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And another note I'd like to make is that we are living in multiple catastrophes right now, considering the genocide in Gaza. As we'll see, I put a banner there, so everyone can see that Indigenous solidarity is all connected. And I think that gathering bodily is something that we enact together in order to combat colonial capitalism and imperialism. When I was on my way here, I saw this funny graph that said defund artists, and I was like, fuck yeah. This is not funded, this is all funded by all of us, and this is how we keep going. And I think being an artist is, about relationships, it's about making friends, it's about being friends and not ceding to institutional credibility. It's not about, trying to climb up the ladder. At the end of the day, if you're not making any money, why debase yourself? Why do you want to make something for the institution? Fuck that. And we're all here together to celebrate. And I feel that, with this book, and also the people have asked to read, we all have the same politics, and people I've asked to play as well. I think it's a way to show that we are anti-establishment artists together, and maybe we can make something new out of this. I don't know what it is, we don't know what it is, we can build it together, and I think that's really important. And I'm not going to do the classic reading the bios of people, etc., because I think that's really boring and generic. So I'm going to ask each one of them to introduce themselves. I'm going to briefly talk about my relationship with them, and then they can come up. So the first reader tonight is Amelia C. Winter. I met Amelia not too long ago, actually, through our mutual friend Josie. She came to my so-called official book launch, where we had a little conversation sort of thing in Brunswick, and Josie was like, yeah, this work is sick, man, you should check it out. And I was like, yeah, alright. And I checked it out and I was like, whoa, Amelia's work is sick. And then Amelia came to another event that I was reading at, and then I found out Amelia's from Adelaide, which I lived before I lived here. And we started bitching about all these little people and, classic country town stuff, like, do you know this person, do you know that person? Oh my god, what are they doing now? And it was just this instant connection, which I thought was amazing. So I thought, yeah, Amelia should read. And please welcome Amelia. Please introduce yourself, Amelia.
Alright, hi everyone. I haven't got that much to say for myself, honestly. I don't know, I write things, I guess, if you want to read more things that I've written. For some reason, after hearing what I have to say tonight, go to ameliacwinter.com. But yeah, I don't know. I'm going to go right into it, I think. This is from a novella in progress called Ghoul House. It's about ghouls. I really hope you like it. Ghoul House. So, the professor said, I want to say one thing up front. There's nothing wrong with this pitch on a stylistic level. It's brilliant, actually. Your writing is very clean. You have a scintillating academic style. On the conceptual level, I just have a few concerns. Mind I read this somewhat quickly, just before this meeting, so if I failed to make a connection or sailed right past a caveat you made, please indicate that, but they're as follows. And this is purely my understanding, remember that. Correct me if I'm wrong or out of line. They're in the open air outside a cafe on campus, drinking mineral water to chase respectable little cups of espresso. The schoolgirl dressed, as she had for all her previous interviews, in a queerish blazer with a collar blaring frilled blizzard wide across her shoulders. She had taken many pictures of herself in the mirror that morning, had spent much of the long bus ride in swiping through them over and over, trying to decide if she looked like an idiot, if she had always looked like an idiot. She was trying not to think of this as ritual humiliation, trying to face forward. Behind the professor, a man ate a burrito hungrily, recklessly, a cocktail skewer holding it together jabbed into his nostril. He grunted in pain. First of all, the professor said, and excuse my ignorance, such are the limits of my awareness, I'm just somewhat unclear on whether this properly fits into the gender studies faculty. First you're constructing a corpus of text by Ghoul authors and analyzing them by light of largely identitarian analytic rubrics. You have an English background, so you might understand the crossover, of course, but English generally has more room for the identitarian than our faculty, at least has room for the closely literary. So this may be more like an English project than a gender studies project, no? The school will decide not to sugarcoat it. I've already been through the faculty here. Dr. Kevorkian told me there was groundwork to be done on the ontological side that couldn't be done with them. I was hoping gender studies could be a shelter. Okay, we'll circle back to that. Second of all, as I said, I'm not an English professor, but the primary corpus seems a little thin. It is, the school will agreed. It's a big problem. I'm wondering basically if there's enough here for a thesis, the school will sighed. Part of the point of this research, as stated in the outcomes section, is to stimulate growth and interest in this field by identifying it. And I think that's really admirable. It's just that that field appears at present to consist of the unpublished works of a Ghoul author, personally familiar to you, various works of online fan fiction by several others, so self-identified, and Emily Dickinson. I have textual evidence for that. The professor nodded vigorously. Sure, I do believe you. It's just, and this is related, the third problem, and I'm a little embarrassed to say this, it's another question of department. She scrolled through the document on her laptop again, her eyes splitting from side to side over the text. I'm just a little unsure. Is this a gender? Here we go, the schoolgirl thought. She put false iron in her voice. Is there not enough engagement with Butler for you? There it is. The professor checked it over again. The schoolgirl was a very talented academic. It was as well-read a literature review on gender theory as she'd ever seen, in a thesis pitch or otherwise. Canonical text dropped into a piranha tank of clever and novel deconstruction, stripped shin bones for repurposed as scalpels. But at the center, something missing. I'm just not sure. Is ghoulness, is this not also, or maybe even more properly, a disability? No, well, not more properly. The professor scrolled up and down some more. A race? No. Her mouth was dry, getting drier. Fine, look, I did speak to the race studies department. They told me to come here, rather rudely. I guess I could understand why. I don't think there's a full delineation here of what a ghoul is. There's attempts at defining it, statements made, but they're scattered all over and they all seem to contradict each other. Here you refer to yourselves as a countryless people. This is gender studies. That was a bit literary, the school conceded. I was speaking in the same sense that, say, lesbians are a countryless people. The professor looked at the schoolgirl like she was criminally insane. The schoolgirl leaned forward, fanned her fingers on the table. Okay, I know in things like this you want a one-sentence definition. I can try and give you one. The professor cut in. I mean, I know what ghouls are. She paused as if before a precipice. They're fantasy creatures known for ugliness, scuttling around in filth, yes? Well, obviously we use the term differently. Okay, but there must be an etymological relation, yes? And from here you look like a perfectly, and here the professor grimaced slightly, that the professor did not know it what, and the schoolgirl thought, they never know it what. Normal young woman. I'm 35. Regardless, you're perfectly lovely. What exactly is ghoulish about you? The schoolgirl felt incoherent, helpless despair building within her. Despair she'd spent her lifetime learning not to convert to rage, to stay it in its frozen form and let go to frostbite in her stomach. I want to answer your questions, but the way you're phrasing them, I want you to tell me how to ask the right questions. questions. I respect this. I want to learn. I'm just looking for a solid definition of what ghoulness is. Right, yes. Well, see, this would be part of the thesis project. It's a contested term, among whom the professor laughed then. Not cruelly, the schoolgirl was sure she would maintain a challenge, just a palms up, help me out here type laugh. There's just no literature among ourselves, contested among ourselves. Okay, lived experience, the professor said weakly. She opened a new Word document, started typing. Look, I need to pitch this to the faculty, so humor me. This ghoulness, is it visible? Yes. By what marks? The schoolgirl furrowed her brow. It's hard to explain, you're seeing them now. The professor's headache seemed to intensify. Is it hereditary, then? Define hereditary. Genetic, at least partially, it's thought. Okay, by whom? The schoolgirl sat solemnly silent. By whom? The professor asked, more gently. Ourselves! She nearly shouted it. Across the cafe, a freshman glanced over anxiously. The professor didn't startle. She closed her laptop. Right, I see. Is this a prank? Sorry? A prank. Is this a prank? I have extended a lot of goodwill here. I'm sorry. Is someone filming behind those bushes? Is this about the quote I gave about the pool incident? I truly was open to this being a gap in my reading. The professor sighed, took off her glasses, indicated parts of her face with her painted fingers. Look, here's me. I'm a transsexual. See this canthal tilt? See this hairline? See this, she traced it, space between the top of my nose and the top of my upper lip? The way it's greater than the space between my pupils? This is my uniform. Others in my faculty, the more sighted ones, whatever, they have their own. A waiter came up, clattering sauces together onto his tray, asking if they wanted anything more. No, thank you, said the professor. She turned her attention back to the schoolgirl. I repeat, darling, you seem so sincere, but is this a joke? Hot tears sprang up behind the schoolgirl's eyes. One spilled. She clutched it as if a boil had just exploded on her face, though she had none, nor any blemishes at all. No. The professor sat stiff, sadly searching the schoolgirl's face with her eyes. Wind howled around the public art sculpture to the left, straining for portent, trying to symbolize by kinetic metaphor the soaring pursuit of knowledge. It had launched steel pillars not quite high enough into the air and landed somewhere among the field of stealing. The schoolgirl looked at it longingly anyway, injury and love mingling. She'd finished her master's 3 years ago at a far more august university, on a far more palatable and ghoul-irrelevant course of study. Her tutoring career had expired not long after. She was still trying to get back. She missed, if nothing else, the feeling of mass transpersonal focus, the dense whisper of laptop keyboards, the blazoned names of long-dead benefactors, the tweedy running dog swiftnesses of professors between classes. The feeling that what they were doing here mattered enough that, in some age previous, great quantities of glass and rock had been refined and quarried to contain it. It ennobled even the least noble of their pursuits. The schoolgirl had no illusions about the nobility of the humanities, but she did have ideas about the nobility of ghouls, herself, her girlfriend, her housemate. Well, her girlfriend, at least. Right, the professor said, getting awkwardly, chair skiddingly to her feet. I wish all the best to you and your political movement. But on a purely academic level, if you want to get something like this off the ground, you need both more literature and, perverse as it seems, a hole in the literature. That is to say, desire. And there is no present desire, at least that I am aware of, for ghoul studies. And she was gone. The schoolgirl's 19th best preferred supervisor, striding away across the schoolgirl's 6th best preferred campus, scanning the bushes for cameras or mics as she disappeared once again behind the high steely tines of the academy. Thanks so much.
Sorry, I forgot the lineup. I'm just trying to see who's next. Oh, it's Angelita. Yeah, Angelita is a staunch comrade. Like, Angelita's gone to nearly every protest, every picket. It's been amazing. Angelita takes all these great photos, documentation of the protests, and it's gonna go down in history, I suppose, because memory's so ephemeral nowadays, and I think documentation is so important, and Angelita does greatest stuff. So please introduce yourself.
Hey, wow, introductions. Aquarius rising, generationally cuspy on the younger end. Funny how Olivia talked about the whole funky on again, off again between gender studies and English, because I also exist in that funky relational space, just having ended tutoring in gender studies at Unimeld and starting a PhD in English at La Trobe, so relatable content, relatable. Yes. How about we start with some chants? All that. Okay, no, I won't. Maybe later. Or you can tell that not everybody could relate to that. But anyway, so this is from a poem called New Couch. I can never tell if this couch is simply the floor pretending to be something else. My throat still chokes on reminiscences, like some memories. It's a funeral, but also a hard word to say out loud. You were sick on our 3-year anniversary. I could be a month off. Who's counting? I hope you've noticed that I'm shy and that I hate shouting. Freud was a dog person, and you disappeared for 2 weeks after I asked if it was worth holding on to life. I wondered if it was my fault you got sick. I never said anything. Talking about feelings is what makes the people I love go away. My ex liked that I was flexible. My hips might be more flexible than my ability to edit sentences about discovering forehead kisses under meteor showers on Elwood Beach on a night that seemed so very never-ending. And his mom dying and him trying not to cry over the phone about her death rattle and how sound is the most unforgettable of the senses. And then a picture of her lifeless body cradled by the shadows next to your room where we created supernovas, clenched so tightly. And you not picking up the phone on a day I could have died. In his poem on Anticipated, Freudian slip, Anticipated Stranger, John Ashbery, with a single R, writes of a pattern-breaking God. This is a God I can pray to on a couch this low, so close to the earth, my goosebumps can sense the gap between my heart and the constellations. What would Lacan say about synesthesia? I haven't read enough. I'm not done yet. Time for a chant.
It's like a little silence in the song.
Okay. This one is from a work that Cher edited. I'm pretty sure most of us know Cher through her amazing work as liminal editor, and I've actually been really enjoying your book. I have it with me. I pre-bought it, and I will ask you to sign it, so please don't forget. This piece is called Situational Fuckability, published on the Liminal Review of Books. It's a review of Amelia Srinivasan's The Right to Sex, which is an amazing book. Highly, highly, highly recommend. And these are the last 3 paragraphs, so spoiler alert. Can the people at the back hear me? Because without the fold back, you know how you're like, ooh, am I loud enough? Alright, so situational fuckability. Emancipatory politics can aim to make the world fairer, but the thing that makes sex tick isn't fairness at all. Sometimes the person you want doesn't want you back. Sometimes they do want you, but it doesn't work out. Sometimes, like the old Goldfinger song, gorillas walk with pretty women on your street. Sometimes The world's sexiest people get cheated on. Successes in sex and love can feel flimsy, arbitrary, undeserved. The losses can feel targeted, personal, unbearable. The philosopher Gillian Rose writes in her autobiography, Love's Work, that there is no democracy in the love relation, only mercy. To be at someone's mercy is dialectical damage. Each party is absolute power and absolute vulnerability. What makes sex, and maybe also love, special is not something entitlement can get you. Frustration is the only inevitable consequence of desire. There are many more ways to be frustrated than to be satisfied. The possibility of satisfaction is itself frustrating. There would be no striving if it was impossible to be satisfied. But satisfaction can lead to its own discontentment. The seductive promise of a successful conquest is less enticing, especially when the distance between lover and beloved is breached. Fuckability is circumstantial, and so is unfuckability. The relationship we have with our own desire is probably the most interesting relationship there is. Thank you.
That was a great psychoanalytical thought about desire, because we always think about, the symbolic desire for revolution, and it seems so delusional, but we're always reaching and reaching and reaching, and if someone thinks I'm delusional, then fuck yeah, I'm delulu. So the next reader is Yudhistira Agato, whom I know as Yudhis, and he's from Jakarta, Indonesia. We've been friends since like late 2000s, and he just happens to be visiting. And then I was like, hey, do you want to do something? And he was like, yeah, sure. So, and he's also a writer and a musician, and we're just, I guess, DIY people who just ended up in like artistic things. And there's a little bit of a connection that we have, despite the fact that we haven't seen each other for some time. Yudhis, introduce yourself and read your thing.
Hi everybody. So I've never done anything like this before. So when I think we talked on Twitter, and I was saying, oh hey Cher, I think I'm gonna be in Melbourne for briefly, and she said, oh yeah, we should hang out. I'm like, cool. And then a week later she was like, hey, I got this reading thing, do you want to read something? I was like, okay. I thought she meant I was gonna read something off her new book, so easy. And then she was like, no, I want you to read something that you write. I'm like, man, so, well, sometimes. So I guess here we go. Okay, here we go. Brisbane seems like a good place for a new home. I probably would have said that about any place, if I'm being honest. At the time, I was salivating at the idea of getting a shot at a new beginning, of turning over a new leaf, just to see if there's anything better out there. Being a foreigner in a completely new country with a different culture and language may be tough, but it still sounds more appealing than feeling foreign in a country you were born and raised in. That last bit might have been exaggerated a bit, but it's something that my 18-year-old self would have absolutely said. Oh shit, okay. Like a lot of other hyphenated identities, I have been struggling to understand just how much I am Chinese and Indonesian. Am I more of the former or the latter? Should I be more of one than the other? What's the right split here? Am I both or neither? Seeing as how my family don't really speak Chinese, and for generations have been communicating in Indonesian and the local language, Javanese, I would comfortably say we're more Indonesians than anything else. Some of my fellow countrymen, however, didn't see it that way. The difference in our skin colors and eye shapes somehow means we deserve less to be there, even though we practically eat the same spicy food and dislike the same government. The word Cina, Indonesian word for China or Chinese, was often shouted to my face by construction workers as I was walking home from school or by some angry rando in public spaces. While these people don't represent the majority of Indonesians, it shows a glimpse into Indonesia's confusing and shaky relationship with their Chinese-Indonesian counterparts, especially in the past. Occupying the land for more than 125 years, the Dutch put the Chinese immigrants in charge of trades, while Indonesians were working the land as farmers, creating social and economical tension between them. As time went on, Chinese Indonesians were still seen as outsiders, their loyalty to Indonesia constantly questioned. Throughout the 1960s, hints of Chinese culture were erased from public view. A new law was passed that forced all Chinese Indonesians to change their names into something more quote-unquote Indonesian sounding. Chinese publications were taken off the market and Chinese schools were closed. The culture ban lasted more than 30 years, culminating in the 1998 riots, where the Asian financial crisis plunged Indonesia into dire economic straits, and Chinese Indonesians became the scapegoats due to the long-standing perception that Chinese businessmen controlled the country's economy, a legacy of Dutch colonialization. Students' protests, civil unrest, and mass violence took place in almost all of the major cities. Chinese Indonesians or anyone who looked Chinese were targeted. Chinese businesses were looted and burned down, and there were many reports of sexual violence against Chinese women. Those with the financial means choose to flee to Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, or other places. The combination of identity crisis and teenage angst fueled me to believe that any place would be better than my hometown of Jakarta. When an opportunity to study abroad came up, I couldn't pass it up. In Brisbane, there were of course still a few less than pleasant encounters with the locals, but I didn't feel targeted. At the very least, I knew who I was. There was no question about my Chineseness or Indonesianness because it didn't matter. I was simply a foreigner. I was there temporarily, and I was simply a guest in someone else's home. Regardless, after a while, I found comfort in the city's DIY music scene and actually made some friends. Going to punk and indie shows became my preferred social destinations, week in and week out, even though I was suffering from imposter syndrome almost the entire time. I didn't understand all the politics, the inside jokes and references, and the scene's do's and don'ts. I was an overseas student who spoke limited English, who wanted to belong, seeking a place where not everything feels alien and I could relax for a little bit. I had found my place, I thought. Brisbane was alright. The fun times didn't last. After graduation, I was desperate to find a permanent full-time job with a bachelor degree that I didn't really care for. After dozens of unsuccessful job applications and interviews, heading back to Indonesia, unfortunately, seemed to be the only option available. Looking back, my quest to make Brisbane my new home probably had ended way sooner, even before I boarded the plane. In what seems to be a fun night of board games and charades, I found myself unable to keep up with the more complicated English phrases and prompts, which completely upset the mate as he stormed out of the room in fury, practically ending the game session. It was probably nothing, or perhaps he was just too drunk. It's silly, but on my end, it felt like an embarrassment, a rejection, a wake-up call, a realization that I'm not quite there yet. After 3 years in Brisbane, I was still a foreigner. Thank you.
I'm just going to take a break to get the rest of the people in because they've just been waiting and I feel kind of stressed, like seeing them there. Please. Thanks. Yeah, it's me now, so I'm not gonna say much. I mean, I've said a lot already, and I don't really like talking, as you can maybe tell. I'm gonna read from this essay called "The Lifestyle Church." It's an essay that I spent a lot of time on. I kept thinking about the DIY punk scenes that I came of age in, and how it, transmogrified in front of me, and, sort of got co-opted by startups, by people with startup mentalities, by institutions. I mean, you can see it very clearly here in Nam especially. It makes me really sad. It feels like a home has been robbed, people have taken our home away, but we keep resisting, we keep, making our own fun. And I guess this event is about making your own fun. So I'm just gonna read from the middle of it. It was a kind of jam, a paper jam, probably, and how it was a frustrating triviality that kept on returning, and which needed fixing in order for the task to continue irrespective of your feelings. There was a sense that history was being created through the unrelenting foregrounding of the present, ready to be picked up again by whoever happens to take up a new mantle. It is, as Shulman observes, a distorted sense of them, ourselves, as timeless, and what McFeeters sees as reacting solely to his own brief and deep past, a cultural amnesia that is simultaneously revisionistic and ahistorical, yet celebrates past heroes to the detriment of the present. As always, there was highly dependent on the level of capitalism one saw themselves within, but we were always going to be in deep shit whether we foresaw it or not. Of course, as it goes, some gentrifications were so complete you never see any of their traces. You wouldn't think that there was a pre-existing history that had been scrubbed out. Whole suburbs decimated and uprooted, entire organizations gutted and restructured, minds that saw the totality of assimilation. Radio stations that used to be independent but have now become a mean deployed for ribbing. DIY spaces turned to co-working lofts and craft beer breweries. Ex-revolutionaries converted into mouthpieces for startups and NGOs. It was around this time when it began to dawn on me that those precious times had vanished. Those times in which you enter a house, know a particular book, and know immediately that that person was your people. A band t-shirt spotted across the street, or in a random airport somewhere in the world. It almost goes without saying that a friendship restarted not long after, that there and then, it was a kind of signalling, a dog whistle of sorts. That is, until the right co-opted it, took our anti-establishment ideas and postures and turned them inside out. Some of them came from inside the house. In a sense, the contemporary alt-right is considered adjacent to the underground. Abuse of power comes as no surprise, so goes the Jenny Holzer aphorism. I read punk memoirs and think, am I going to sound like this? A wet rag continually bemoaning the underground's recurring demise? Shut the fuck up, Greg Graffin. There was a break in mass culture every time someone announced his supposed death. The announcement was a part of the spectacle. Sometimes it was a way to cash in. It was a Marxian metabolic rift, except the natural environment wasn't a thing that was being alienated. We were using the language of capital to refute its logics. By then it's become entrenched. You're in too deep. It's too late to step off the train now, which is exactly like how you got into it in the first place. The spin cycle of lifestyle, what saves you and traps you further, the land of no return. Your mind has already been molded by structures and affects, which makes reintegrating into so-called regular society comparatively even more onerous, a very poor preparation punk rock had been for later life. You've already spent so much time within it. The contrast becomes jarring. To extricate yourself and not experience its lingering effects, how it used to shape the entirety of your world, your understanding of reality, is a Schrodinger's cat of the psyche. Both things are equally true. The cat is both alive and dead at the same time. A rudimentary drawing of quantum mechanics superimposed on the mind. We are all addicted to these environments. There is something so captivating about always being on the edge, on that shaking precipice of promise. Something new and something cool is just lurking around a corner, and we'll arrive at it if we kick around long enough. But it wasn't ignorance either. Many of us were clued into the fact that we were, to once again borrow from Fisher, replicants, that everything that seemed to be inside was biopsychosocial machinery that should be reprogrammed and stripped out. It was a kind of suspension of disbelief, a condition in which people hold on to fantasies or ideals that turn out to be detrimental to your well-being, and continue to do so anyway. But a counterculture's inherent presentism made it such that no one could have really anticipated the future, even if there had been earlier iterations of the same thing. What Fisher had portended as the forgetting that the memories were false, that the domestic scene was so much pasteboard and image virus. How was I to know? Why would we take the rhetoric of liberalism and apply it in a place that's supposed to widen the imagination, create meaningful political change, cement a lasting legacy of meaning? It was entryism at its best, an environment that was reliant on the foundations outside our little microcosms before anything had even been internally laid down. The intrinsic contradictions were what paradoxically made it thrive. We were kidding ourselves when we thought we were doing anything to annihilate the status quo, especially not when it was watered down and made out to be easily understood. If entryism is a prerequisite towards someone discovering a counterculture, then how could it continue to be youth-led? If one has to mature in order to be realistic as opposed to being idealistic, then the entryist wheel turns on. The problem as well may lie in how the splintering of subculture through a framework of lifestyle has been absorbed by neoconservatism and its adherents. If neocons are self-proclaimed leftists who eventually became mugged by reality, then lifestyle will continue yelling its clarion call. Thanks. And now for the last reader, it's Fjorn Bastos, who is someone.
Amelia. Sorry.
Yeah, I've known Fjorn for a while now as well, and Fjorn's just someone that, we really connect, and Fjorn's always sending me these voice messages that makes me laugh. And I'm not a voice message person, so I always text back, and Fjorn will send a voice message in return, and I'm just like, ha.
Everybody's used to my stupidity with that here.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Another staunch comrade. Fjorn, please introduce yourself.
Oh shit.
That's the game.
It is the game, isn't it? I make some music under Copperfilia. I'm also helping to run a studio with some of the elders in the community around here for Black Pearl down the road. Oh yeah, I keep it real close, eh? What else do I do? Writing sometimes, living, I have a baby. And just, staunchly believe in going from the bottom up with everything. Life, community, sex, whatever. All of it. I'm also a smoker. So I want to start off I always want to acknowledge country, so I'm just going to say this reading is taking place on Wurundjeri Balaku, so the unceded country of the Wurundjeri Wurrung clan, of the Wurundjeri Wurrung tribe of the Kulin Nation. And I pay my respect to the sovereign peoples whose custodianship of these lands, waters and skies remains unsevered despite occupation, war, dispossession, genocide and neo-colonial governance. I acknowledge First Nations' connection to cultural material, creative practice and epistemologies that have existed for more than 60,000 years, despite all attempts at erasure. You cannot erase what is embodied. Thus I celebrate the enduring knowledge and resistance of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I acknowledge the Black deaths in custody in this colonial occupation are the result of a form of psychosis that is derived from white supremacy, finding its voice in whiteness and white innocence. And I declare mine, and I guess everybody's here, I hope, dedication to the unquantifiable significance of Black lives to decolonizing and de-Zionizing, and promise to work endlessly in solidarity with anti-racist and anti-colonial resistances to secure the synthesis of a past and present into a secure Black future. Now this reading's an old one. I wrote it like a month after I gave birth. And, you know, it's a radical form of creation like many other radical forms of creation. I want to make that clear. Like, birthing's one thing, bringing life into the world is another. Hey babe, come in, please. This is also another really important person, for fuck's sake. Make room for the queen. But I'll say that in this anyway. So I thought it was an apt time to talk about the process of bringing life into the world at a time where some parts of our world are demonstrating that the value of the lives of pregnant and birthing people, infants, children, and those who prioritize those lives and their safety, and care for them and raise them and teach them, the value of these lives are being manipulated before our very eyes to try to force us to believe that their value is nil and that their existence is evil. At a time when the enmeshment of colonial and capitalist structures and imaginaries has made an opening for imperialist governing powers to demonstrate the core of their creative logic and capacity. It's a logic that denies the generative principles of death and birth and life and creation. By delivering many of us only to annihilation. Death is different to annihilation. They are two different things. And it's a logic that tells us that the modes of creation, autopoiesis and its mimesis poiesis, are abstracted from all ecological rhythms of reason so that they can be controlled. And I've already said this, that bringing life into the world is not the most primary and valuable creation. Creation has no inherent value, only the value we give to it. That's why it is important to think about the value of creation. I've been lucky to create a lot in this world that I value and a lot that has gained value. A child is just one of them. So I started thinking about bell hooks, rereading bell hooks. Obviously the pivotal fucking moment, God is change. Yeah, God is alteration. Alteration is creation. Creation is variation on form. So, I'll start now. Sorry, big fucking disclaimer. Being a parent is daunting. The place for a child in society is shaped by colonial and capitalist systems. Patriarchal white sovereignty and property ownership stifles our imaginations and stifles our energies, and limits access to social worlds that don't welcome children, and there are a lot. Like hooks, bell hooks laments, in the predominantly white world where children tend to be seen as private property, it's hard to form close relationships with children. The liberatory possibilities that children can bring into the world is diminished by a society hostile to cultural, racial, sexual, gender complexity. And these exclusionary divisions are forms of domination. They make parenting from a place of love and openness an impossible task. Hooks believes that before we embark on liberatory journeys, we must first always revolutionize our consciousness. How can we welcome in a possible future that holds space for those excluded? How do we revolutionize our consciousness to better understand children? Why did I start the journey of having a child as someone who didn't really fucking want one? I'm a cis queer woman, South Asian and British heritages, and I found out probably fucking Latin too, that has embarked on starting a family at the time with my partner, who was also queer and trans, and we wanted to start a family because we believe newness and change come into the world through generational paradigm shifts. We are involved in building community as well, and see this as investment, not just in the present, but also in the future for those who will inherit what we put into the world. Creating a new life is just one way to do this, and that's one we felt called to. The way we parent calls in family and friends to act as pillars in our child's life, to guide them is to develop a sense of self-worth that can be foundational for love in all its complexities. And this comes from an awareness that wherever domination is present, love is lacking. For me, being an emblem of love means embracing the radical newness that children bring into the world, no matter how foreign this newness seems. In a world that Bell Hooks fears is no longer open to love, enacting a loving bond means understanding that a child is creation. And this creation is not repetition. It's like a radical form of creation. It mirrors a constant of the cosmological order. At the level of the cosmos, concepts like capitalism don't exist. They are not a constant of the order of things. As Octavia Butler states, the only lasting truth is change. God is change. The cosmos is our master, just like the ecology in which we sit is our mother. Change and alteration, they're forms of poetry. The journey to starting a family for myself and my now ex, it was long and clinical and bureaucratic. Queers engaging in IVF are heavily scrutinized, and the process is difficult and it's invasive. However, we were able to see the very cell that became a child in its infinitesimal minuteness. And when that blastocyst was implanted into my body, an entire universal unfolding commenced. This blastocyst reminded me of the Big Bang. This kernel of potential underwent a series of chain reactions that exploded out of itself and miraculously created form. The mind struggles to grasp the abyss this transformation fucking bridged. The foreign origin from something so foreign to myself and infinitesimal to the recognizable entity it became. Self-organizing cells, autopoiesis, synthesize so much information, drawing on genealogies that stretch back long before us. A blastocyst growing and becoming, and a child growing and learning are all creative processes too. Like poetry, it uses the structures that exist and makes something that has never existed in this way before, that somehow at the same time feels deeply familiar, like a bridge of meaning over an abyss, bearing witness to radical creation strikes us, and it pierces the heart so deeply. It opens us to a form of love that can return us to the promise of what hooks we call everlasting life. Hang on one more. Just like fucking back to front printing. Who does this? I said no and the printer said yes. How a life manifests is unpredictable. We do not have mastery over a child's unfurling. And this newness is beyond our control and possession. A child's unfurling is a force that escapes the imaginary bounds of society, or it fucking should anyway. The oppressive structures of society fear the power of the great magma-like soup that is the infancy of a radical form unfolding. Like a star, a universe, or a cell, a child's unfurling has no boundaries. It is expansive and explosive. It was definitely explosive. It uses everything we know to know more. The foundations for a possible future do not need to be discovered, they exist. When they require to become, it's up to us to embrace the chaotic, poetic, cosmological act of creation that is change. Because when we come into the world like a new star, we are not blank slates. We are the culmination of all possibility that came before us. Thank you so much.
So this reading event please.
But there's still wine.
Yeah, there's still wine in the back, so please help yourself. It's free. And also there's a gig happening 2 doors down at Old Bar. If you're interested, please go. If you're not, it's no big deal. Yeah, if you've got a ticket here and you want to go to a gig, it's 25. So just let me know your name. I can let the door person at the pub know. It's just a bit chaotic because it's 2 venues. That's why, and Old Bar has their own OzTix thing, and I couldn't control that. So that's just how it is. But yeah, so thank you all for coming. Thank you to May and Graham for May over there and for hosting this. It's been really wonderful getting to know May over time, and it just feels like a little community that we have, that we all look out for each other. Yeah, it's really great. Thanks all for coming.
Yeah, sure.
Oh yeah, and there's books in the back of books and wine. Oh yeah, it's $5 off. Considered compared to the bookshop. So I'm undercutting bookshops, but then I'm the author, so we're quits. So yeah, if you want to go to gig and you want a $25 thing, let me know your full name. That's it. Thanks for coming.